You join us on a very cold morning in a little village called Benwick on the old River Nene. The Angling Trust East Midlands Winter League has just finished. Now this is a series of 6 matches and the top 3 teams make it through to the Angling Trust Winter League final. This year our tackle and baits team won the league and I was lucky enough to be awarded the Stacey Cup, which is the top individual throughout the whole league. I'm very proud to win the Stacey Cup as this is a trophy steeped in history, goes back all the way to 1962.
The Stacey Cup is actually quite prestigious and individually every angler gets points for each match they fish. The best possible is 1 point. If you miss a match you get 1 more point than the number of teams, so you get an 8. So the absolutely perfect score is 6 points from the 6 matches for 6 wins. It's never been done before.
The Stacey Cup dates back to 1962. It's a lovely cup, it's solid silver, so it's worth a bit. And there's some top anglers, several of them are not here now, unfortunately, that have won it over the last 60 years. There's a lot of heritage that belongs to this cup. You know, it started in '62, and one of our anglers, Dale Stones, won it 6-7 years ago, and his father won it in '74-75, which is a bit unique.
It is something a bit special. It really does carry some wonderful history. I mean, whenever I look at an old cup and see engraving that old, I just feel humble, because you think of all the people over all the years to whom it's meant so much. And it really, lots of good anglers in our league have never won it.
I'm Stan Binge, owner of Stan J Sports and Fishing Tackle. I'm part of the committee for the East Midlands Winter League. Caroline and John Bates and Bob Bates are the main people, along with my partner Felicity, and they run it very well.
I'm Fizz. I'm officially assistant match organiser for the East Midlands Winter League. I have been in that role for a lot of years with different official match secretaries. We haven't got one at the moment, so particularly from the results point of view, I've actually been match secretary who gets the boards, does the adding up, checks the teams, checks the totals. I've kind of defaulted into the results part of match secretary this year, and I've enjoyed it.
You really do need to think outside the box. You need to have all the tricks and tactics in your armoury to win this cup.
For an angler to manage 6 section wins it shouldn't be able to happen really with the calibre of people.
To win it with a 6-point score is a once in a lifetime job. I've known people to win 3 or 4 sections but never 6. I doubt whether it'll ever be done again. It really is an amazing achievement.
I managed to win the Stacey Cup with a straight 6 section wins, but this wasn't achieved just on my own. This was a team event, and our team meetings really gathered that much information that made my job so much easier. Now that the Winter League has finished, we've returned to the old Nene at Benwick, where I'm going to run you through a few of the rigs and tactics that I used to win the Stacey Cup. Here on the old River Nene, it's very similar to a lot of the other rivers and drains in the country, in that when it turns cold, the fish, especially roach, tend to migrate into the town centre. Whether this was because there's a slightly warmer temperature or less predators around, i.e. cormorants, I'm not sure. But it's the same across all of the country, how these fish just shoal up in the town centres. Now here at Benwick, there's a lot of fish, a lot of small fish. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's a fish race, but what it does mean is you have to fish efficiently. So getting your rigs and your bait especially down to the fish where they are feeding. Now unfortunately, with lots of small fish means pike, and there are a lot of pike in this stretch. So how I start this match, or how I start a match generally, is going to be based around this. The river is about 13 metres wide, about 4 feet deep. Now key for me is that you don't want to make much disturbance at the start of a match. If you do make a lot of disturbance, that can mean pike will hear this disturbance and they'll move in over your baited area. Now before the match starts, I'm going to start on a 4.5 metre whip. It's a bottom end only rig. We call this a skinner rig. Now this skinner rig means it's a bolt straight down, just 5 inches from the hook, no droppers, so your bait is going straight down to the bottom as quick as possible. Now this skinner rig is a bottom end only pole float, and it's designed so that you can just sink your line under the water away from any surface skim. These drains are affected massively by surface skim, so the ripple that's formed on top of the surface. By fishing a bottom end only pole float, you can flick your rig out, put your pole tip under the water, drag it back quickly, and that sinks the line, therefore it's less affected by the wind. Now we had a fair bit of rain again last night, and this has actually raised the river, not much, a couple of inches, but it's put a bit of flow, but it's also brought some debris into the river, so we're looking at reeds and stick-ups just floating around the river. Won't affect the fishing, but might make presentation a little bit complicated. So how I start the match. Now before the match starts, I've got a 4.5 metre whip. I'm going to flick it out to where I'm going to be fishing, trap it between my legs, and then ensure that when I cup my balls of ground bait in, they're going to be fished right over the top of my whip. So we know we're fishing at the right distance. So as the hooter sounds for the start of the match, we know that we're going to cup ground bait in exactly on the same line as our whip. We're not throwing anything at all, because we don't want any disturbance, we don't want any pike being drawn into the area. Now, because it's a very, very cold morning, I'm only going to start with 2 balls of ground bait just down the middle and 1 pot of hemp over out of the way at 11 metres. Just going to start with 2 balls of ground bait like so. A few squats, few pinkies in, nothing special. Squats are there just to hold the fish on the bottom, and a few pinkies, just what we're going to be catching with on the hook. 1 ball, second ball. The second ball's not going to be quite as hard, so it just breaks down a bit quicker. Two balls. The only other thing I'm going to do is cup a full cup of hemp, 250ml cup of hemp at 11 metres. This line I'm going to trickle in hemp, and this will be where I fish for the last hour or maybe 2 hours of the match. Now, one important factor when you're fishing on these drains is that they can flow both ways. Now, the reason I say this is, if the river's flowing when you start fishing, don't be tempted to put all your gear, all your bait at the start downstream, because if the river stops and starts backing up, it's going to be very difficult to lay a rig all of the time over your baited area. So therefore, it's always best to start by fishing smack in front of you. So let's try first cast. I'm going to start on just a single pinky, and it should go under straight away. And just like that, wow, we've got a roach of about, I don't know, 2 ounces. What a great start. Hopefully that means we're in for a good day. Now, another important factor that's often overlooked is the positioning of your keep net. When you're catching lots of fish, you want that keep net positioned just in front of your knees. So when you swing a fish in like so, unhook it, you can just drop it straight into the keep net without wondering where it is. Because trust me, some matches are won with ounces. And if you miss the keep net with one of those fish, it could cost you big time. Another good habit to get into is not to strike too hard when you're fishing with a whip. Because everything's so direct and the whip is so forgiving, it's just a lift with your wrist and then one continuous motion, bringing the rig into your chest. Now, just because we're catching on a single pinky, don't be scared to try 2 pinkies, sometimes even 3 pinkies. This does occasionally bring a better stamp of fish. Now, one of the most common things and frustrating things is when you feel your peg drifting away. What I mean by that is the bites are slowing down, you're not getting as many bites, and it's a case of working out what to do. What I like to do is feed another ball of ground bait. Sometimes we call it double cupping. So sometimes I'll give it 2 balls of ground bait and then go to the long line and just see if there's any fish on that long line just whilst that middle line settles. So we've just refed that middle line just with a ball of ground bait with a few squats and pinkies in. Whilst it's setting, I'm just going to have a quick look over the hemp line. Now, I'm not going to start on hemp. I'm going to start on just a single pinky just to see if there's any fish about. Well, that's a very welcoming sign. First drop over on the hemp line, we had a bite straight away. That now gives us the confidence to rotate the 2 lines throughout the match, hopefully keeping bites coming and no quiet spells. Now the rig I'm using on this long line, the hemp line, is totally different to the one I'm using down the middle. The one I'm using down the middle is a bolt down, let's get the bait down straight away. This longer line, you have a spread out shot, and this allows a much slower fall of your bait. When feeding hemp, you're normally aiming to catch the bigger fish that are in the river. These bigger fish, especially roach, are very clever, very wise. And if the water's clear, like it is today, those bigger roach will be watching that hemp fall all the way down. And if it looks unnatural in any way, they will not take it. Now this longer line, the hemp line, it's best not to hammer it. And when I say hammer it, don't take too many fish from it in one go. It's best every time you go out there, catch 2 or 3 fish, if they're a better stamp that is, and then drop back into the middle line and carry on catching there. Keep feeding the long line, and then hopefully every time you go out there, you'll catch 2 or 3 nice fish, then come off it and go back down the middle line. Just keep repeating this throughout 5 hours and you'll be surprised just what sort of weight you can catch. Now something else that caught me a lot of fish throughout this Winter League campaign was casting a small waggler over to the far side of the river. Now although it's only 13 metres, 14 metres on average, casting a small waggler, as long as you cast it correctly and make no disturbance, so just feather it down just before it lands in the water, really can get you those extra bites when the river's fishing quite hard. There's just some days when fish just don't want that pole tip over their head, and this is where the waggler really does come into play. So hopefully today's session has given you an insight into the tactics and the rigs that I used all through this Winter League. Maybe they might just gain you a couple of extra bites next time you're out.